today, and artificial intelligence is to blame. Let me explain. Think about Google, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, platforms that are used by billions of people every single day. Have you ever thought about the fact that these companies make their money, and they make a lot of money, by selling us to advertisers? They sell our time and they sell our attention. And how do they do that? Using artificial intelligence. AI bots analyze our online activity to figure out what content to feed us to keep us clicking and scrolling for as long as possible. It turns out that political extremism, fake news, anything that reinforces our existing beliefs and makes us demonize each other is very effective in making us click. Now, AI has no morality. It's not trying to feed us opposing viewpoints to broaden our perspectives and make us understand each other. No, it feeds us the content it knows we like and knows we'll click on. And it's a vicious cycle. We find ourselves inside these echo chambers of our own political ideologies. Eventually, we begin to live with this illusion that everyone else is looking at, reading, seeing the same stuff that we are. And so when we encounter an opposing viewpoint, our negative reactions are intense, and the divide is growing. This divide is perhaps the most stark in the US right now, where nearly 40% of voters say they don't have a single close friend who supports the opposing major party candidate. And listen to this. A third of Americans say they would be very unhappy if their child married someone who had opposing political views. That's sad. 6 years ago, it was only 4% of Americans who felt that way. Now, even my own family has experienced the friction of having different political views. We often just avoid the topic of politics to maintain peace. And I'm thankful that political polarization hasn't torn my family apart, but that happens to families all the time. And if political polarization can tear families apart, think about what it can do to societies. Now, artificial intelligence through social media is making people more and more isolated from each other in general, but especially from people who hold opposing viewpoints. Now, when large swaths of people who hold opposing viewpoints are isolated from one another, animosity festers, hatred is sown, and disagreements erupt into violence. Just look at the protests that have been happening in the US for the past 6 months. Artificial intelligence has already created the largest political divide our societies have ever known. Looking at this deep, ugly, cancerous division, it is already plain as day that artificial intelligence is bad for humanity. Thank you.
We make decisions, and we choose to see what we want in the Facebook. So why blame others for bad decisions made by humans?
You're correct that humans do make decisions, and one decision that many humans make is to follow social media platforms. And what every social media platform does is uses artificial intelligence and complex algorithms to feed us content and make us think we're choosing everything we're looking at, and most of what we're looking at, we're not choosing. The AI bots are choosing for us. And we begin to think, oh, everyone sees the same thing as us, but it's not true. If anyone's on social media,
a lot of us are on social media, but it's a conscious choice that we make ourselves. So a lot of things are bad for us, drugs and guns and such, but why blame others for the decision you made to go into it?
Everyone does have the decision to go into it. I think that most people are unaware of how dangerous social media actually is. People are starting to talk about how it affects your neural pathways to receive likes on social media, how it's actually like a drug, and people have a hard time putting it down. People have a hard time limiting the amount of time they spend on their phones, and you could say that it is an addiction, and I think people are very unaware of how affected they are by the drug of social media.
So we blame the drug. But why blame the technology? We blame the drug itself for people getting the drug, or the decisions around people going to the drugs?
I think people started using social media, and even the inventors of social media didn't necessarily know the direction it was heading. But now, the way that social media platforms make money is to use us. We're considered users. And our time and attention is what makes them money. And they don't care if for our own well-being we spent less time on social media. They want us on there for hours and hours and hours on end. And if you all look at your phones and how much time you spend.
I think we are discussing whether AI is good for humanity here, but I think you're talking about a business model that's been existing for a long time. So I think our discussion should come back to AI. And AI on social media, we know it's bad, and there's been actual improvements made on it. So I'm just curious, the technology can be good or bad, and we see that it's bad there, but we're making corrections. But you can't say that the entire thing is bad, isn't it?
Well, we're arguing that overall, it's bad for humanity. Now, social media is a big part of what I'm talking about, but it's the artificial intelligence used within these social media platforms and things like Google that feeds people content that they aren't necessarily choosing on their own. If you type in a Google search bar, you get different results depending on where in the world you're typing that in.
Tell me, do you use Google for...
I don't think you're allowed to interrupt me.